inch you get closer, never there. You're never there. You're never, ever, ever, ever there. Never there. You're never there. You're never, ever, ever, ever there. Hey!
Mais en pile, chay pa lou. Sac vide, pa camper, puis c'est capot, augmenter rivière.
When the sky falls and the earth quakes, we gon' put this back together, we won't break. When the sky falls and the earth quakes, we gon' put this back together, we won't break. Sap I say, my part of princes, my Haitian gods, and all of my princesses. Our condolences as you fighting against this. We're right by your side while we trying to make sense of this. Heavenly Father, help us see through these problems. And for those that left, accept them in your garden. See, here's my theory, the country's already starving, so we sacrifice many, this should light on all of them. Y'all please pardon, I speak from my heart. It's the only way I can see this tragedy befalling them. So let's get involved with them, hand in hand with them, arm to arm with them, till they get strong again. When the sky falls,
Tomorrow, can't wait until tomorrow. Hey, ti mi amor, hey ti mon amor. Not gonna leave you stranded. Oh no, oh no, oh no.
sky falls and the earth quakes, we gon' put this back together, we won't break. When the sky falls and the earth quakes, we gon' put this back together, we won't break. We learned from the past, New Orleans was flooded, so we know we just can't rely on the government. We under the rubble again, here we go rumbling. When we gon' catch a break? My friend lost his mother and then Colleen lost her uncles and them, buried with no caskets, they just put covers on them. And our tears fall when we fight back. Story ain't done, can't end like that. Nah, not like this. Small but survivors gon' carry on your name. You live on inside us. Your memories alive with us. You inspired us to rebuild this country. You just got us.
Tomorrow, can't wait until tomorrow. Hey, ti mi amor, hey ti mon amor. Not gonna leave you stranded. Hey, not gonna leave you stranded. Oh no, oh no. It's not the angels that are on their way. It's not the bells of Santa Trinity. The people waiting, position vacant, for hands to help, not just to pray. Hey, ti mi amor, hey ti mon amor. Not gonna leave you stranded. Hey, not gonna leave you stranded. Oh no.
break.
I've got wheels of polished steel. I've got tires that grab the road. I've got seats that selflessly hold my friends, and a trunk that can carry the heaviest of loads. I've got a mind that can steer me to your house, and a heart that can bring you red flowers. My intentions are good and earnest and true, but under my hood is internal combustion power, and Satan is my motor. Hear my motor pump. Satan is my motor. Hear my motor power. Satan is the only one who seems to understand. I've got brakes, I'm wide awake. I can stop this car at any time. At the very last second, I can change directions, turn completely around if I feel so inclined. I've got a mind that can steer me to your house, and a heart that can bring you red flowers. My intentions are good and earnest and true, but under my hood is internal combustion power, and Satan is my motor. Hear my motor power. Satan is my motor. Hear my motor power. Satan is the only one who seems to understand. Satan is my motor. Satan is the only one who seems to understand.
Two jumps in a week, bet you think that's pretty clever, don't you, boy? Flying on your motorcycle, watching all the ground beneath you drop. You kill yourself for recognition, kill yourself to never ever stop. You broke another mirror, you're turning into something you are not. Don't leave me high, don't leave me dry, don't leave me the sound of drums. People couldn't believe what I'd become. Revolutionaries wait for my head on a silver blade, just a puppet on a lonely string. Oh, who would ever want to be king? I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, I know St. Peter won't call my name ever alone this word, but that was when I ruled the world. Hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, I know St. Peter won't call my name ever alone this word, but that was when I ruled the world.
Good morning. Y'all ready to get started? Yes? That's a yes from everybody? Anybody hanging out in the back? Come on in. Well, welcome to OMA RTB. I'm Jeff Lochner. I'm president of MediaPost. I guess most of you should be familiar with MediaPost. We do all this kind of crazy branding where MediaPost is the parent organization and OMA. Does anybody know what OMA stands for?
My middle name.
Welcome. Would you like to speak next? I think it's also the word for grandmother in Germany. So when we first started doing the Twitter feed that was showing, we'd have tweets all about grandmothers rather than the OMA shows. For us, it's an acronym for Online Media Marketing and Advertising. And it's become the brand that we've done these one-day shows under OMA. And y'all know what RTB stands for. So welcome here. Let me explain briefly how the day is going to work, and then we'll get you started with the program. Hopefully everybody has an agenda. We're going to start with a couple of keynote talk, a panel, and another address, and then most of the rest of the day will be some panels from up on the stage here. At lunchtime, there's going to be lunch for everyone. We're serving lunch in the room next door, but you'll notice when you go over there, there's no chairs because you're going to bring your lunch back here and have lunch in this room and hear a presentation, and then we'll go on with this afternoon's presentation that's going to happen. Probably most importantly, what we need to do first, and y'all can join me in thanking our sponsors for the event. We have Integrate, Media Math, Alpha Bird, Tube Mogul, Meta Markets, and Altitude are all helping to sponsor this event today. Our Master of Ceremonies is Joe Mandisi, who's Editor-in-Chief of MediaPost. So I'm going to introduce Joe, and he'll keep things going all day long. Joe?
Thanks, Jeff. Well, it's great to be back in San Francisco because I think of this as being the mecca where a lot of the technology, imagination, innovation, and human endeavor is taking place that's transforming the overall marketplace. I'm going to make this quick. Normally, Steve Smith, who is my co-programmer, would be up here and giving you a much more organized and professorial view of what's going on in the market. I'm a little more didactic and all over the place, but I'll try and be focused. But I have to tell you about a man-machine experience that brought me here today, and because I think it's apropos. Because when I step back, we use the term RTB, but we're really talking about machines and machine logic informing and helping people create a better advertising and media and marketing marketplace. And the most exciting and interesting part of this for me is watching how the machines affect the way people do things and the way people react to it. I flew out last night, early this morning, from New York, and most of the machines and people ran well until I got to San Francisco. I'll spare you all of the other incidentals, but when I got to my room, I set my smartphone, which is also my alarm clock, to wake me up this morning because I only had a few hours sleep. And the man broke down and put in PM instead of AM. The machine did its job, but was going to do it 12 hours later. Thankfully, the people in the room next door to me, the humans, were boisterous and got me up, so I'm here. But I say that because it's really important for people to understand the machinery. Otherwise, they won't get the best out of it and won't take it to its next level. And the reason I'm really excited about the RTB marketplace and programmatic is because it's allowing for what I believe Madison Avenue always should have done. When I started working for Adweek like 30-plus years ago and started covering the television marketplace, I thought it operated like Wall Street, that it was all about, supply and demand and logic and efficiency and, value. And what I learned right away is that that marketplace was based on culture, ways of doing business, relationships, and it just dominated our society so much. And it was frustrating as a journalist because I'll save you the whole backstory, but, a lot of what's happened with the way the media marketplace is shaped in the U.S. over this time has been based on reporting, public reporting. And I always felt frustrated that we couldn't get real market data to report on it. And it would come out after the fact, thankfully from organizations like Interpublic, and I'll introduce Brian in a minute, but that would set the standard for, well, since the 40s for what ad spending really is. But when we were covering the markets, we never really knew. It was very opaque. So when I started understanding what was really going on with the Lumascapes chart and how this ad technology was starting to make data available so that human beings could see it in real time and act on it, I was very excited. So there's a lot of terms for what we're talking about here. We're using RTB. I would say it's code for programmatic, but it's really code for how people are using technology to gain control and make markets more efficient, more open, and more practical. So I have a lot more backstory, but I'm going to save that because I know you want to get onto the agenda. Jeff already did a great job of taking you through the day. I'll remind you of various points. So I'm going to just jump in with an introduction to Brian because it also brings it full circle. The first time I heard agencies talk about like this Wall Street model of managing markets efficiently was actually pre-digital. It was another rival agency group. It was Paige Thompson at Omnicom's DDB. It was before they had OMD. And they started using this term portfolio managers, right? And their job was to go out and look at, the media marketplace dispassionately, logically, and maximize the client's budgets to get the most impact for their ad messages. But there was a disconnect, and I just didn't see it really happening. They spoke about it, but when I started seeing how agencies were beginning to use programmatic and audience buying data with units like Cadreon and their rivals at the other big agency holding companies, I got very excited that finally we'd have open market data about what was really going on, and we'd be able to cover this thing with logic. Now, it's taken a while, but I think the benchmarks are starting to come into place. And a year ago, I asked Brian if he could benchmark the industry for us. Exactly how big is this RTB thing, right? So just a little background. Interpublic has been tracking this since the 40s. There was an endowment from Mrs. McCann at McCann Erickson to Harvard University to start economic forecasting and measurement of the advertising business. I mean, Interpublic literally defined what advertising was by doing that, you know, creating those silos for television, newspapers, magazines, et cetera. And over time, they've updated it. And it's not always pretty because you have to make decisions, and I think that's some of what we might hear from Brian today is how do you define what advertising is when it starts to seep into other forms of marketing or, in this case, sometimes technology. This is a business right now where we're going to talk about it later, where algorithms and machine logic seem to be making decisions, but you still need human beings to step back and say what they are. So Brian is like one of the digital all-stars inside Interpublic. He was, for a long time, the digital guru at McCann in San Francisco. He ran and resuscitated and created the Modern Media Lab in New York from LA, and I encourage you to all visit it because you will see the future if you go there. About a year ago, I asked Brian to come in and benchmark this business, and it was pretty startling. He said it was about $3.4 billion now. That's 40% over last year. That's the second fastest growing medium sector of the advertising media business, just behind mobile. And so I want to know, we have a panel later on mobile RTB, so that must be growing at double that rate. But significantly, it's already almost a quarter of all display advertising transactions. So it's a material business, and it's growing fast. By 2017, at least in his old projections, Brian was forecasting it would be about 43% of all display advertising. Importantly, RTB and programmatic are not just impacting online. I mean, it was created because it helped organize all that remnant space, and it's making it super efficient, but it's starting to impact all media. We've covered a lot about how the out-of-home marketplace is starting to be structured this way, using the same exact models as online, because you have the same issues, a lot of disparate, fragmented remnant space in physical locations. And the technology can do the same thing, especially with digital out-of-home and digital signage. And it's really fascinating to watch how that's structured. So I believe this stuff is going to affect every facet of advertising media and things that we don't even define as advertising and media right now. I could give you more of Brian's backstory, but you've probably heard enough of me rambling with 4 hours sleep. I do want to say he's the only guy I ever knew who also drove a car that ran on cooking fuel. So on that note, I'd like to introduce Brian Monahan.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Joe. So I work inside Magna Global, which is the trends and forecasting arm for the Interpublic group of companies. So I'm one step removed from the RTB sector. So when Joe called and said, hey, how would you like to try to hold the attention of a room full of some of the smartest people in the industry dealing with one of the most complex subjects in the industry, at 9 o'clock in the morning, I leapt at the opportunity because I wanted to get back in and not only reforecast what we had published last year, which I'll show, but also sort of take a step back and try to get a sense of what's really happening in this RTB space. It's changing so quickly. And I would argue that the industry that we think we are in is actually changing around us. And so what I wanted to talk about this morning is, winning as the goalposts move. As the goalposts of the sport that we think we are involved in the RTB industry, as they move, what's really going on and how can we position ourselves as individuals and as companies to succeed. And to get there, I'll give you a little context on how we see the world from Magna's perspective, which is fundamentally time spent with media is skyrocketing. It's happening around the world. In the US, we think that the average American is spending 70% more time with media than they were 20 years ago, right? What it's like to be alive on this planet today is very different than when we were growing up. There's just more media all the time, bringing all sorts of content and experiences and commerce and advertising along with it. Contrasting that explosion in the supply side of advertising is the reality that demand is relatively fixed. Okay, if you go back and you look at ad spend relative to GDP or other sort of indicators of macroeconomics, the size of the advertising pie is relatively fixed, right? It goes up and it goes down. This is ad spend benchmarked to nominal GDP, and so as the economy's good, the ad industry's good. As the economy's bad, the ad industry tanks. Some interesting trends about how those curves are becoming more aligned and how the peaks and valleys are more extreme. But the point is, while we have way more supply of time spent with media, consumers generating inventory, the buy side is relatively fixed. So we've got more competition. If you're a buyer, you've got way more decisions to make about where you're going to put the client's money. And there's another flip side of what we think of as consumer total mediation, which is all of this time with media is bringing a bombardment, a barrage of advertising. We estimate it's 2.3 ads per waking minute is what the average American is exposed to. And we've done a lot of research in the last year. We've done experiments on over 170,000 individuals around different types of ad experiences. And one of the things that we're realizing is that ad avoidance is a coping mechanism, right? To just move around the planet, not be distracted, not be catatonic, you have to ignore ads. Otherwise, you would be stuck. And whether it's polite ads that sort of sit nicely on the side of a web page, they get ignored, or whether it's obnoxious ads that interrupt the user experiences, they get equally ignored, right? So neither polite nor obnoxious really work, which is why the notion of being much more smarter and scientific and precise about the bets you make in terms of where to show an ad are critically important. It's also why some of the conversations about native advertising and new types of ad experiences are equally important. And it's not just display, it's all advertising. And frankly, in television advertising, fast forwarding is the least of our problems. So when we look at actually wire people up and bring them in and have them watch TV, 60% of the ads are ignored just by moving their head. It's, we think maybe 8 or 9% of ads are ignored by moving your thumb to push fast forward. So this bombardment of advertising is impacting the value of the ad units themselves. And it doesn't just impact an agency or an advertiser's business in terms of the value of what they're spending their money on. It also impacts a media owner's business because this is kind of an eye chart, but the dark bars there, where you see the little stripey things, are the ad breaks. And what we looked at, and the width of the different bars is the size of the audience. So this was an experiment we did to just sort of look at audience migration through channel changing. This happens to be TV. We've looked at it for radio as well. The same thing always happens. When the ad break comes, the audience flees, and that really undermines the value of the media company's asset, right? So getting advertising to work better is in everybody's interest, in light of the new conditions of what it's like to be alive on this planet. And so let's hope the machines can help sort it out, right? It's sort of overwhelming complexity. We got to use technology to leverage it. It's really important. And I think that part of the thing that's happening in the last year is, for a lot of reasons, marketers and advertising organizations are realizing this is not just sort of one new tactic about how to do better digital advertising. This is really a critical solution to managing how to go to market with fixed resources in a fully mediated world. So projections. So we estimate at Magna that the US display RTB industry in 2013 will come in at $3.3 billion. It's slightly lower than what we had forecast a year ago, largely because we thought we'd see more premium display dollars enter the market, and I'll talk about that in a second. We think that in 2013, the year-on-year growth of the US display RTB business will be 39%. And we changed the forecast a little bit to backload it. So we still think it's actually going to grow faster over time. 39% growth rate this year is pretty good. And we think it's going to be over a $7 billion industry in the US by 2017, in 5 years. So to put that in perspective, we think that RTB display is about a quarter of the display market overall in the US. And we think it'll be up to half in 5 years. We don't include video, RTB video, in our models yet. If you put a gun to our head and said, how big do you think that industry is? We'd say it's probably another 15% of the RTB industry. But we don't have enough data sources yet to really sort of publish on that. So this is just looking at display. As Joe mentioned, we believe that programmatic buying is the second fastest growing sector of advertising that we track. We think mobile is faster. Mobile's coming off a smaller base with also just a total explosion of inventory. But we do think that programmatic is growing faster. So this is the 5-year compound annual growth rate for US spending. And we think programmatic is going to grow 25% over that 5-year period, which is faster than online video, it's faster than search, and other forms of traditional media. Mobile is an interesting point because mobile is really, when we look at where all the extra inventory of time spent with media is coming from, it's largely coming from mobile. And I would argue that with tablets being the fastest selling media device that we've ever seen in history, we ain't seen nothing yet. I don't think we've seen the impact of tablets on media consumption. Content hasn't been optimized for it yet. Users are just sort of figuring out how to use these things, and that's also going to be a real game changer as we start to feel the real impact of tablets, which we believe are very different than phones. But the point is that there's a lot more supply coming our way through mobile devices, and whoever really cracks the mobile identity issue so that we can really open up mobile inventory to RTB and programmatic bidding, whether it's through device fingerprinting, token passing, behavioral fingerprinting, whatever all these sort of interesting methodologies in play right now with really smart companies that are trying to crack it, that's really going to open up the growth of the RTB industry as it rides along with mobile. So speaking of keys to accelerating the growth of the RTB industry, when I was at RTB a year ago, we identified a handful of tensions that we thought were holding back explosive growth in the industry. And as we sat back and sort of looked at them, we kind of feel like, well, these are all still very relevant issues. I don't think that any of them have really been resolved. So there continues to be a tension between transparency and specifically on the agency side with agency trading desks, the transparency that our clients ask of us and margin pressure that we are under as publicly traded companies. That continues to be a dialogue that is getting negotiated and addressed on a case-by-case basis with individual clients. I think by and large, our clients are recognizing that to engage in programmatic buying does require a specialty stack of technology, a specialty stack of people, and it has a different sort of business model. And as long as we deliver the outcomes, that there's room in there to preserve margin for the agency, for the services business. Privacy versus user experience, right? So do you give up privacy to get a better user experience? You know, there's a alarming trend, I would say, of browsers moving to a default position that makes it harder to track. But at the same time, we don't really see too much really sort of threatening legislation, at least in the United States. So this just feels like this is an issue that continues to simmer without real resolution. So that's one that's going to continue to sort of hang over our heads in the industry as we look to grow. Oops. Creativity versus production efficiency. So One of the things that we've learned with all of the 170,000 consumer experiments we've done over the last year is that an ad product can bring you an attentive, targeted audience, but what really happens coming out of that, and that moment in time can help you lift top-of-mind awareness and some brand recall. But if you really want to drive mid-funnel, lower funnel, purchase intent, all that sort of good stuff, it's up to the creative to do it. The ad product can only get you so much. So what's the creative solution to take advantage of all of this great targeting that we can do with RTB? You know, we would argue it hasn't emerged yet, really because it continues to be hard to make a cool machine-made ad. You want to see what sort of the state-of-the-art of machine-made ads, then look at your Sunday circular. I mean, that's a machine-made ad. And so resolving this tension between creativity and the need to have really efficient production for cool ads to unlock these niche targets is a remaining tension we have in the industry. Bundling versus targeting. So I mentioned that the emergence of premium display as a sector of buying has not emerged as quickly as we thought it would. In the TV world, you know, if you want to get the really good stuff, you have to buy some of the less premium stuff. So they bundle it with what you have to buy. And I would argue that in the premium display world that we're going to start to see publishers who will open up premium display largely through their private marketplaces in exchange for an overall sort of business commitment. So they'll start to bundle access to their inventory so you have, in an RTB way along with other custom types of buys. We very much believe the buying world is bifurcating between the sort of audience delivery and reach with the high-touch custom stuff. And we think that those will start to be bundled more. You know, dynamic insertion versus simultaneous consumption. So this is really a tension when it comes to unlocking programmatic television buying, right, where we don't really have the ability to dynamically insert an ad one at a time. We're starting to see some interesting workarounds there, which I'll talk about in a second. And then lastly, this tension that we outlined last year, which we think is still very much an issue, which is media planning versus a reach and frequency goal, or said another way, trying to predictably reach a block of humanity versus spending money to deliver some sort of CPA, right? Some sort of DR. They're very much different ways you go to market. They're different rationales to get the money from the CFO in the first place. And from our perspective, most of the RTB money is still coming out of the DR bucket, which is basically you can have as much as you want as long as you hit my CPA, as opposed to we're going to market because we know if we speak to this section of the population, our sales are going to go like this, and it's been working for 20 years, so let's keep doing that. We haven't really seen that reach and frequency approach to RTB buying emerge yet, and we think that's a tension that's holding back spending. So, okay, great. A lot of the issues still there. We all know that. We live that every day. What else is new this year? Well, the Facebook flood was obviously a big change since we last met. And we think that just that flood of inventory hasn't really led to a corresponding increase in billings or money going through. It's really just sort of taken some of the inventory away from the other exchanges, or added to it at least. Premium RTB, as I said, we think has been slow to ramp. We still believe it's going to happen, but we haven't really seen it yet. We still feel that advertising is very bifurcated in the sort of DR bucket and the custom human-based negotiated stuff. The premium stuff is interesting, particularly because one thing we have seen that's new this last year is starting to use a RTB buy to get smarter about the bigger, more expensive bets you're going to make. So one of the things that we've heard on the buy side is using an RTB buy to get smarter about where you want to, a display buy about where you want to go place a video buy, as an example. And we've also heard from publishers that the response that they're seeing in their RTB book of a business is impacting how they think about packaging, selling, and deploying their premium business. So this notion of RTB and premium working together, we feel like we're starting to see that as an intelligence tool on both sides of the transaction. The programmatic entry into the television space is also something that we feel has picked up steam since we met last year and talked about what's happening in the industry. I mean, the truth of it is there's 150 cable networks that aren't even measured by Nielsen. And I would argue that the real people who need or have the opportunity to grow revenues through RTB in the TV space are the local TV stations. And so there's a lot of inventory that's right now, if you ran the eCPM on it, is really low, and there's a business case on the station side and network side of why they could make more money out of that, we believe. And the trick, of course, is there's no dynamic insertion, so you got to sort of buy it all. So what we're starting to see, Simulmedia, Telemerica, are people looking at aggregate data sources to programmatically or sort of use machines to make smarter planning decisions about where the audience is going to be, and basically have smarter currencies than what you can get from Nielsen or the absence of Nielsen for a lot of these networks. So this is an exciting sector that certainly on our side of the business in the agency world we're very bullish on, and trying to find ways to improve the targeting and efficacy of the TV buys, particularly in that long tail of television inventory. But overall, the trend I would say in the last year is that all the organizations involved, all the stakeholders, advertisers, agencies, publishers, they're moving from an experimentation phase to really an operationalizing. Thank you. It's not just a little tactic for how to get a better CPA. Marketing organizations are realizing that their data is a strategic asset, and it can inform a lot of their business, right? Not just advertising. And you're starting to see the initiatives inside these corporations to really get their data house in order and apply it to business decision making. We feel that probably most acutely in the advertising space as you look at retailers actually starting to open their own trading desk and really start to apply their own data. It's a symptom, we believe, of a larger thing that's going on inside the buy-side community. Which is why, if we revisit our familiar and helpful LumaScape, which has these sort of helpful goalposts about the marketer on one side and the publisher on the other, we actually think those goalposts are moving. And if you think about the marketer, it's not like the marketer sort of comes to market with some sort of predefined notion of who their customers are. They do, but what we're seeing is that the data architecture that impacts decision making going further upstream, really to the transaction level. I mean, if you think about it, it's pretty amazing that you can go into a store, wave a piece of plastic, and get permission to walk out of that store with an expensive piece of merchandise. Well, there's a lot of people, obviously, probably many in this room, who touch that decision that allows a human being to wave a piece of plastic and walk out with an expensive item. All of that leaves a data trail. All of that, we think, can impact what we've thought of as our sort of field of play in the RTB advertising space. On the other side of it, you have consumers. Well, really, we just get to publishers, but consumers. And, anybody who's a Clue Train Manifesto fan or follows Doc Searles and read The Intention Economy, there's been this notion of VRM, vendor relationship management tools for the consumers to better accurately manage their data for a while. But a couple things are emerging that we think are indicators that this sector is starting to tip. One is the initiative of public governments to expose their data. So one thing I would encourage people to keep a close eye on is, San Francisco is actually doing a pretty good job of trying to take public data and make it available. That's going to require giving citizens more controls over their data. If the government is going to fund the creation of these tools, then maybe that's a way to sort of get some of these products to market that we haven't seen before. The other thing that we think is tipping this a little bit so that consumers will be an active participant in this economy is subscription fatigue, or sort of payment subscription fatigue. In our point of view, there's only so many monthly fees you're willing to have on your credit card or however you're going to pay. and that each one of those presents an interesting choke point for how consumers can start to manage how they get more out of that relationship. But if it means they share more data to inform what they're sold, we think that that's an interesting point, and we think the companies who have those relationships realize that. So the notion that we just live in this world between marketer and publisher, we think is actually changing. We think our services go much further upstream on both sides. And we also think that kind of how we've bounded the industry that we play in is also changing. For example, the signal of effectiveness is largely the click or some sort of attribution model, which is great, but one of the things that we are very bullish about is eye tracking and just using webcams to actually optimize based on attentiveness. Again, back to our point of view that the biggest leakage of value for our clients' investment is paying for ads that nobody pays attention to. If you can start to optimize based on attentiveness, which we can measure, that sort of changes the nature of the box that we sit in. And lastly, it's this RTB business that we're in. It makes sense that RTB was first pointed at stocks and then secondly pointed at ads. Those are very commercial decision makings, but fundamentally what we're trying to do is build an engine to predict the future, right? You're trying to, at a moment in time, predict the future of what the outcome is going to be. And yes, that makes sense that would be pointed at advertising. It's a huge commercial sector, but really it could be applied to any high stakes decision that an enterprise has to make. So super exciting space. Who knows what we'll be talking about if I'm lucky enough to be invited back next year. But a very vibrant sector, and thank you for letting me share our perspective.
Brian, you want to stay for a couple of questions, if we have any? I just want to ask you real quickly, I noticed your marginal takedown on the growth rate. I was looking at some data we report on from SMI. I know you work with those guys, Standard Media Index, and they also showed a slowdown in the overall display ad growth business. They saw it first in Australia, now they've seen it in the US. And I'm wondering, is RTB the factor that, because it's creating such efficiency by taking out all that remnant stuff and making it more accessible, is that lowering the average for online display? And is the number you're seeing in the slowdown of RTB a function of the fact that RTB has made the market so much more efficient?
Good question. Probably. I do think that for years and years, the digital media industry has talked about stealing share from television companies, and I think television media owners are historically, however you want to describe them, are actually getting more aggressive with how they fight back for share. So I think we've seen a lot of growth in the television space as well. So I think maybe the digital display slowdown overall may be because it's moving to more efficient RTB channels like your search, Joe. But I also think that TV is also pushing back aggressively to steal share back from digital.
And just to follow up on that point, so the more media you add to this mix of programmatic trading, it's not going to slow down. It's only going to expand. I mean, you mentioned television. I think video on demand is a huge untapped sector. I mean, that's gigantic. You mentioned all those long-tail networks. I think that's over 20% of all impressions that Nielsen measures that are not even sold in the market. Well, I want to ask you about a slightly futuristic one, which is, you mentioned how mobile is really going to expand everything. What about augmented reality? When every single space can be an ad impression, I mean, what's going to happen when all that inventory gets into programmatic trading? How is it going to what's it going to do to pricing pressure and demand?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think where that really lands first is point of sale. And I think a big part of our media lab is dedicated to a retail experience center so that when a shopper walks through the door, to have some intelligence about who that person is and have that impact not just the sort of point of sale displays, but the pricing that they're offered, either through an augmented reality experience or some other ways, is a great example of how this technology goes further into the enterprise and is not just about the real-time purchase of ads.
Any questions for Brian? Okay, well, I'll have a bunch more, but I know you have to get back and make those machines work. So thank you, Brian. Well, that was a great start and a great way to frame exactly what we're talking here. One of the things that Brian touched on was, and not directly but indirectly, on the importance of this technology and this marketplace for the higher level decisions like, you know, branding and creative. I mean, he did say, like, creative is the next big challenge, you know, in messaging. It's funny because this morning at the Advertising Research Foundation conference in New York, they're introducing the new president, Gail Fugit, who comes from General Mills. And one of her, we have an interview with her this morning in Media Daily News. And one of her missions is to really focus on messaging and creative and what connects those consumers with all those exposures, those 170,000 tests that you did. Because it, you know, I love that concept of coping mechanism. It's just brilliant. But you know what? We're always doing that. We're always filtering out irrelevant messages, and it's the job of your colleagues to break through them. So on that note, I want to introduce our next panel, which is really going to do a deep dive exploration on what's in this for brands. You know, why do brands care about it? You know, Brian was saying how it's kind of moving upstream to a much more transactional level. And I think what he was saying is that's about the data. And when you can understand that data and apply it to branding and messaging, you know, you've really got a powerful loop. But in the short term, I see everything going on in this business driving us more towards performance metrics. And I get concerned sometimes that the brand's being left out of the mix. On the other hand, you have big enterprises like real serious brands like Kellogg's adding in-house capabilities. And Brian was talking about retailers creating their own trading desks. I found that fascinating. I didn't even know about that, so I'll have to follow up. So to lead our next panel, I'd like to introduce Ryan Polly, who is the Vice President Corporate Development at ComScore. And in that role, you know, he works with leading publishers, marketers, and technology companies to develop the best advertising and research products to help us understand exactly who's seeing what and how they're reacting to it. Before that, he was COO of Ads Expose, and I'd like to introduce Ryan to lead our panel. Ryan?
Well, great. That couldn't have been a better introduction with the thorough overview of where we are from an RTB perspective. And as Joe mentioned, we really want to cover how brands are embracing RTB, what's required to have them use the technologies and tools more effectively. And so to start off, I'd like to introduce the panel. We've got Brendan Moorcroft, who's the CEO of Media Brands, the audience platform, and then Marcus Pratt, who's the Director of Insight and Technologies for MediaSmith, Alan Smith, Head of Media for North America for Essence Digital. And why don't you guys start out by talking a little bit about your role and how RTB plays a role in your business today from a operational perspective. Brendan?
Sure. So Cadreon is the company that we created within Interpublic Group. Brian alluded to being one of the first in the RTB space. Cadreon was a service unit that we created inside of a holding company to be what is now coined agency trading desks. So obviously it's fairly critical for my business to understand the RTB space.
And so MediaSmith is an independent media agency based here in San Francisco, about 50 employees. And we're primarily digital, but we do all media. In my role, I oversee the execution of all RTB, which is part of almost every campaign that we're doing currently, and also assist in evaluating new media platforms and identifying opportunities for our clients.
And so Essence is a full-service digital agency, a global agency as well. So. And in a similar vein to what Marcus said, so really looking at the spectrum of all digital media, and obviously as RTB grows, that's becoming more and more important for us.
Great. So I guess the fundamental question for the panelists today, and we'll dig in, is why are brands embracing RTB? And is it all about performance, efficiency, immediacy, conversions? So are they using it as a platform to drive conversion and not just for upper funnel awareness?
So I'll take the first crack. It's it's all of those things, right? So I'll draft off of what Brian was saying earlier as well. It hasn't caught on to some of the core upper funnel reach and frequency based media terms like the rest of the media universe has. But it's only a matter of time. I think Brian and I agree that it's just a matter of time before this actually starts to hit. First and foremost, the same way that brands and clients embraced digital was how they embraced the RTB space. So it was those that were in B2B marketing, it was those that were in demand generation, it was those that were using data and intelligence to make decisions as fast as they could and had operationalized how to do so, how to build creative, how to build media. Those were the first to embrace it. And it's natural. For us, it wasn't a surprise. We saw it in our client base, anybody that was more metric-based. Microsoft was our first client that embraced this. They were heavily metric-based. They had tools and technologies that could interpret what the space was doing, and they jumped all in. They're also a media company. They're also a technology company. We've seen that trend just continue. Those that seek performance, those are trying to sell things and have got hard data to prove that they can, jumped all in. Now we're starting to see people that can interpret audience trends, data trends, so pieces of information, digital breadcrumbs that people are leaving behind, whether it's on a social platform, whether it's web browsing. The fact that we can expand our definition of audience segments, that we can see behavior that may correlate to a decision down the road, is making it really appealing for brands to start to research and watch what people are doing and then make decisions on how to spend media. So we are starting to see a shift and a swing that as a brand-based marketer, you're going to start to understand your audience a little bit in more detail with more accurate data than you could before. Closer to what Brian alluded to as transactional level. We totally agree. That you can see transactional data of audiences come to light and you can do something about it. As a brand marketer, why in the hell wouldn't you want that? That's phenomenal. That is a great thing to jump on. So we are seeing it across the board for all.
Got it. I would just add that I think that the reason a lot of brands got into this in the first place was the same reason they started buying ad networks several years ago, reach and efficiency. And these things started showing up on media plans, and a client might say, well, what is a rocket fuel or something like that? And they didn't even necessarily know it was RTB before we started having all these conferences, but they found that it was effective at meeting whatever their goals were, and a lot of those were conversion at first, they were efficient reach, frequency, but now you're seeing the level of control that a brand marketer can get in saying, I want to hit 50% of that audience 3 times in a week. It's a lot easier to do that if you incorporate RTB, even if it's a brand metric, than if you're going out and piecing it together with direct site buys.
Marcus, I agree with you, but there's one major distinction that I think we still have to ensure people understand. There is a difference between a trader, somebody who does understand the notion of real-time buying and is using a piece of trading software that we call DSPs, versus folks that are still buying in aggregate into networks or guaranteed trade. There is still a fundamental difference between how a media person makes a decision to evaluate point-based, GRP-based, impression-based, CPM-based buying versus those that understand how to use a piece of software and enable all of the tools that they've got at their disposal using a suite of software. They're still not the same thing. No. They're converging, absolutely, but they're still not the same thing.
I completely agree, and I think that's where we're seeing the evolution going for some of these marketers that didn't know they were getting RTB on their media plan, but it was being done, and now they're saying, hey, tell me more about this and how can we take the control?
I think you guys are making really good points. So
thank you.
It's nice, isn't it? It's a good way to start the day. But I think we're kind of moving from a world where, like you said, so we were replacing ad networks, which is actually a very tactical thing. So we were in a world where we're really just trying to incrementally make things different. And now actually we're moving to a world where we can buy and leverage first and third-party data and be much more strategic about how do we buy today and how can we move the needle on that today in order to achieve what we need tomorrow. And I think video is a great medium to really leverage for that. I think what you were alluding to earlier was basically that maybe the brand side of things is not quite there yet, and maybe it's not, but mostly because a lot of the platforms are kind of separated in delivering video inventory. But actually, the fact that video inventory is there and we can use it and leverage that, and it's an effective medium in order to build a brand, I think actually things have moved on quite considerably in the last few months.
Great. So one of the things that Brian mentioned was that transparency's been at the top of the list for a while now as one of the concerns. I guess that has a number of meanings depending on where you sit. Why do you think that still remains a concern? And is it something that you hear from brands as a concern?
Yes, I mean, everybody's concerned with that. Easy. I think from our side, when we're out buying exchange-based inventory, there's a lot of inventory out there that is not transparent. And people always say, well, why is that a publisher would want to hide that? And I tell them, either it's something really bad and they don't want you to know how terrible it is, or it's something really good and they don't want you to know what a great deal you're getting. But in our experience, we have that conversation with our clients. We tell them, these are the options that we have, and some of them say, I only want to buy properties where I know the exact URL where I'm showing up, and we say, okay, and we can make that happen. For others, we can say, hey, we might be able to get something else for a lower rate, and if it works for you, it works for you, but here's the risk, and here's what we're losing in terms of transparency there, and they understand that.
Yeah, and on the agency side, Joe wrote a piece sitting in front of everybody today about the differences in the holding companies, and each of the holding companies have chosen to go down a slightly different path about the business model that drives. And so you've got, on one side, you've got Group M, on the other side, you have IPG, and we've just fundamentally chosen different paths of how we operationalize this business. I think we do need to clear the transparency lines. But there's also a bit of more of a macro point here, and I think this is still something that just plagues digital today. Transparency and where are my ads? I mean, crap, that's still a thing that we're addressing. Like, show me my ads. I'm spending this money. Show it to me. I want to see it at all times. We talk about ad avoidance. We can't even find our ads. I mean, that's the craziest part.
The longer this industry spends its time trying to figure out where their ads are, the worse we're going to be. If we can move to a world that's completely transparent and then move into things like viewability, then we're in a much better world than for everyone, not just for
trust the
individual
software,
agencies.
basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. So let's jump to talk a little bit about data and the role of data. Obviously, in RTB environment, that's a key component. And for brands to have scale using data, is that given that some of the risks that have occurred more recently with Firefox and others, is there really a concern that that we should be thinking about? I mean, Brian mentioned that it's probably not as high on the concern list, but are you hearing from brands related to this space where the access to data is something they're concerned about?
No, I think people stealing data is what people are concerned about more than anything else. I mean, I think that's what's still holding major publishing companies that have got such rich understanding of their consumers and the data behind what they use. People are still concerned about that being leaked and taken anywhere else. I think we need to be prepared for the transition from a third-party data world to a first-party data world. Absolutely, that's coming. We know it's coming. Companies like MediaPost are doing great acquisitions and deals with Akamai so they can understand how you compare CMS technology and whatever's serving in a first-party state to what's being held in a cookie today. That world will change, and so we'll have a whole host of big opportunities for software companies to help bridge that gap for us. But we're still going to use data on audiences to make better decisions about what to serve them or what media to buy. The mechanics around how it works, sure, they're definitely going to evolve. We'd be silly not to think they wouldn't evolve.
I think there's an element of needing industry help. So I think companies like Evidon have done fantastically well in kind of consulting and helping. I guess it kind of, for me, it comes back to the industry. There's a big difference between someone being uneducated and then getting sued for doing something wrong, which I think is happening and is going to happen a lot more. And I think there needs to be kind of a more of an industry stance on helping brands to be in line and to audit and make sure that things are done, rather than agencies or brands having to employ an Evidon to make sure that they're whiter than white. It's at this point it's a very complex situation. If you look at there's the US, yes, but if you look at if you're a European marketer, you have Germany's a great example of that. You've got regional laws as well as national laws, and they're all different and they don't agree with each other. And if you're a marketer in that world, I mean, how are you supposed to keep up? I think you need help from bodies to make sure that you're in line from a data perspective, And also, I think the big concern is the leakage of data. I don't necessarily think it's, I think if you're trusting to work with a company, then the trust of the data should be there as well.
I think we are going to see some interesting lawsuits probably in the next couple of years. To echo what you said, particularly in bringing on more first-party data and using that online, I think there are some companies that are going to overstep the boundaries and push the envelopes in, taking consumer-level, purchase data that is totally personally identifiable and sanitizing it in some fashion and making that into something you can track and target online. I think somebody's going to go too far, or they're going to miss one step there, and you're going to see that there are people that are actually personally identifiable in their cookie data or whatever personally information it is that's in their browser, and if somebody catches wind of that, they're going to be upset.
And I guess from an industry perspective, if we know that's going to happen, should there be someone out there trying to help stop that rather than let the lawsuits, follow suit? I guess that, for me, that's why the NAI we're our own worst enemy,
But I actually think we've done a pretty good job as an industry in self-regulating our activity, because at the end of the day, if you're on the buy side, you're only here to be able to ensure that your client performance is doing as best as it possibly can. And if you do anything, if there's any malpractice that prevents that, then you're screwed. You'd stop.
Exactly.
So as long as there's a constant emphasis on the performance of, I think that's a lot of the self-policing that'll go in.
Great. So one of the things I think, Alan, you noted was that one of the challenges perhaps for brands with RTB today is that it's primarily display inventory, and moving to video might have an impact. I guess that to the data question and your points about that a lot of the data that potentially is at risk is some of this maybe retail data, because it's so personally identifiable. It's purchase information, it's a purchase history, and some of that's being used. It would seem that brands would really want to take advantage of that data, and they could use it in display effectively. And so given the volume of inventory that exists today for brands with this data, clearly there's an opportunity there for brands to be leveraging that. You guys are probably seeing that?
Just leveraging, So leveraging first-party data in order to be better, absolutely. And retailers are very good in this space. You only have to look at companies like Criteo to really understand how much growth we've seen. So the mere fact that retailers can contextualize every buy based on who's visited their site and what they've bought is an incredibly powerful thing, and it's what will drive business. But from my perspective, there's an element of incrementality into that too. So yes, we know the people. It's important to know the people we have today, but it's important to grow that consumer base.
I think there's an issue of scale when you apply data to video as well that's hindering growth. And we all talk about people are watching more and more video online, and that's definitely true. Where that's happening, a lot of it's happening in these premium environments, and it's maybe in a place like Hulu where now they're allowing more data to be brought in and put on top of their buys, but that's been somewhat of a closed environment historically. So when you talk about data-enabled sort of RTB-based video buying, the inventory is somewhat constrained in terms of quality inventory that you can take to a CMO of a major brand and say this is where you're running, and then applying that data on top of it, you're just limiting that pool to a point where you're going to have a hard time really competing for those TV dollars, as people tend to talk about.
I think there's an element of kind of overlaying data. So people often get kind of confused about excluding users because they don't know them. I think in a lot of ways that just means there's an opportunity to sell something different, or to put a brand message out there, to build something, because they're at the top of the funnel. I think understanding that, and you're right, but I think overlaying first-party data in order to, even on video, to understand and maybe deliver a different message is what's important.
So I'll just add a couple things. I think first is that every marketer has a voracious appetite for data and is trying to figure out the best indicators to why an audience matters. I think the difference between where we are in the digital space today and why it's still in display and it hasn't hit the other channels yet is we've made it transactional. We've fit the data signals to pieces of software and algorithms to do something about it. But that is coming everywhere. Every traded, served way of getting a piece of media is going to have an element that's traded through one of these software pieces, and that audience data is going to be what you interpret to decide what you invest in and not. I think if you look at bigger signals, look at Twitter's acquisition of Bluefin Labs, a great company that was starting to take chatter about programming to redefine the way you measure TV. And give you a different effect to now trade on the currency of a program. And if now Twitter is now the foundational element of capturing all of this, all what we used to call old water cooler effect around content of TV, that if you start to push that into a tradable world, that you've got a data signal on a piece of content, and now that content may be worth something a little bit more than you did before, and a GRP isn't really the thing that you want to measure it on, you're going to add a transactional system to that. That's why we're doing this. It's just another way of taking a data-driven decision that we always are chasing on an audience to do something with it. We're just interjecting software in the middle of it.
So I guess then software eats the world over time. And
that's what Microsoft has been saying for years.
And to that point, and your earlier point of there are traders and then there are kind of traditional media buyers, and that there are all these new metrics that are being used. How do you compare the different mediums if you don't have a singular currency to drive a comparison across?
You've got really smart media mix models, and you work with companies like yours to interpret all these signals coming in. I mean, I think that's what agencies are going to spend a ton of time investing in analytics to try to determine what is the cause and effect of all these decisions that we're making. And it's opening up a whole new channel of services for us. It's introducing a whole new wave of capabilities, and it's bringing a whole new type of person into our industry. All are really positive things.
Yeah, I think for me this question about GRPs across channels. If fundamentally you can get a common currency where you can, as a marketer, if you can understand how many GRPs across X number of channels in this complicated world reaches your ultimate goal, then absolutely it makes sense. From a digital perspective, we can do so much more. We can deliver so much more insight, both on the planning side and then even on the reflection side. So post-campaign, and I think that's a common currency and coming down to that so that you can align with your strategic goals is absolutely important. But it doesn't, the insight should not stop there.
And I think it's never been just about GRPs. I mean, we know if that's all a client wants, you can go and buy a bunch of quarter-page newspaper ads. Your money goes a lot farther in terms of GRPs. But a GRP is not a common currency across online, print, radio, broadcast television, because the units are all different, the experiences are all different. A 60-minute spot on the Super Bowl is going to cost a lot more, on a per point basis than a 5-second teaser on radio, and that's the way it's always been. So there's more that goes into that analysis than just what is the cost per point.
Great. So I guess with television today and the effort to bring more dollars from TV to online, and knowing that the buyers are using this currency, what steps do we need to take as an industry to help them better understand the impact and effect that can come from this medium versus the existing? Or is it more about, over time, that medium becomes connected in a way and converged where the data's there?
It's not an either or, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, yes, within our industry, I think we always talk about where we're taking share from one place to another. But the truth is, in a connected world, a connected consumer, an agency is only worth its salt if it understands how all of this works concurrently together. That's still what our job is on the buy side, is to figure out how all those things come together. To me, it's not a dilutive exercise. Brian's stats sort of play it out. There's more media, there's more intersection points. It's just trying to figure out the right sequence of events to try to do. How does this work concurrently together? If you have a trade-off on how much you spend, what's going to be the most effective choice, given you're forced to make a trade-off because you can't spend all the money in the world to do every media plan?
Yeah,
That's what our job is.
That trade-off is kind of key to what it's about, because every channel has different impacts on each other and also just generally on the consumer. Competing with kind of like primetime TV with, I don't know, an online video is is a pretty tall order, and the amount of frequency you need to get to do that in online video versus one primetime exposure is totally different. And I think understanding the impact of each channel and even the weight within that is what's important. And whether that, if we can then delineate that back to some sort of common currency, great. But I think there's no silver bullet. I think everyone is totally different.
And I also think we just need, as an industry, I think we need to create better content that lives digitally. I think the greatest example I saw last year, the thing that I still think was the single biggest event, was watching Felix jump out of a freaking balloon. I don't know how high it was above the earth, but that was an incredible marketing event. Red Bull absolutely crushed it. That was the best ad of the year last year, and that was video-based content online. That stunned the industry. I mean, we got to do more of those type of things, right? Great smart content created in an environment that it absolutely works and it gets shared and spread immediately. I mean, that's what we need to do more of.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, digital has so much more potential to create much more meaningful impacts. Okay, it just doesn't have the mass and the scale and that power, but the potential of the platform is so much more. And the Red Bull example is a good one.
The Red Bull example is also a good example of scale. I mean, look at how many millions of people watched that thing happen, and then how many more millions of people shared it. That was a major scale event. It's not that we don't have a scale. It's just that we don't repeat it often enough.
And I think most marketers now are not taking that approach. They're saying, how can I take my 30-second spot and put it online? And we're going to have to see a shift in how people are thinking about that. And it's not a broadcast buyer that's going to say, you know what, I'm going to allocate 10% more of my budget to online. That might start to happen as we see more and more people that are just not tuning into traditional television, and you're going to have to reach them somewhere else. You can't just hit your audience by a couple of primetime spots anymore. But it is going to require a shift, I think, at the CMO or the high-level marketer in the organization to decide, this is how we're going to take this content, and we're going to shift our approach in what is branded video content when we're online.
I mean, the real miss is, should we really be talking about building a brand? That Red Bull example is a good one. Should we really be talking about a brand buying a spot in the Red Bull ad, in the Red Bull content, or should we actually be trying to be what Red Bull are trying to do? Build brands, build experiences around just different and more diverse content and things that engage consumers rather than a 30-second spot. And I think that's, for me, that's where we need to shift, is much more to custom and different things, because the consumer landscape is much more diverse and harder to navigate these days.
Yeah, that's great. I guess I don't know the math on the Red Bull investment on a CPM basis.
Well, but it's what they do. That's
There's
their
some smart media people in this
effort.
room that can figure that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And they did take some of that footage and put it into a broadcast TV spot that they ran later. So.
Good. So one of the things Brian mentioned as well is that there's a local TV opportunity. Are you guys doing any experimentation today with programmatic on television?
Yes, we're doing exactly what Brian talked about. So we've been skunk working something that we've called Map TV for the last 9 months. We've actually signed up about 10 advertisers. We've spent a couple $1 million now taking that exact approach. So taking a data inventory approach to programmatically deciding what TV we can buy across local cable channels.
It seems like it's challenging to actually buy television on a real-time basis, and I think Brian said, we don't have that dynamic insertion for the majority of inventory yet. We're seeing more and more things that are on televisions but delivered through the internet that are getting scale, so we can tap into all the inventory that you might have that's ad-supported on somebody's Roku box or whatever might be there, and there's a lot of really niche content that can be extremely targeted. The scale is not huge right now. I think on the other side we're seeing use of data, not necessarily in a pure programmatic real-time fashion, but things like what Simul Media is doing in buying that inventory more intelligently and applying more than just your Nielsen data to a television buy. So the two of those are going to start to come together. But right now, we're still not seeing that we can go in and dynamically serve an ad to this household and a different ad to that household when they're watching their local news.
Yeah, and I mean, as a digital agency, we work with a lot of offline TV buying agencies, and I think actually it's good to work with these agencies, and I'm not trying to eat their lunch or anything like that. There's a lot that they can do to help. I mean, the amount of scale that they're buying on TV impacts the efficiency at which they buy, and that is important for a brand. But also, there's a lot that we can bring to the table. The Twitter Bluefin acquisition and just kind of having social buzz monitoring to help inform the buy, as well as also just the understanding of the contextualization of the creatives we do in our buys can help inform how they deliver messages on TV. And so I think, again, we're not trying to eat their lunch, but it's definitely a case of closer collaboration in order to create, just a better end product.
Great. So to get scale and to get across these different platforms, one of the challenges that is commonly brought up with the LumaScape is that there's a lot of fragmentation today. Are you guys seeing that that's impacting your ability to buy through singular platforms? Have you created your own tools? How are you able to solve for that today for the brands you work with?
Yeah, I as an agency, I find this incredibly hard, and I think the choice from a buyer is so the choice in technology and also inventory is so incredibly complex today. As an agency, actually, we took the stance pretty early on that again there are so many smart and talented people in this industry that will push forward their own products. So being agnostic is an incredibly important thing to be. I think what's starting to challenge that for me is the stacks. So things like DoubleClick, Google's stack, and making it easier to make choices is becoming harder to become agnostic. But for me, it's still important to remain this kind of pick the best product for the best purpose, and invest in that rather than pick something that might or might not win out and may not be best for the client at the end of the day.
And does that probably has more resource requirements for you, given, yeah?
Yeah, it does. But again, it kind of has an upside, in efficiency and also just understanding, usability and training on the platform. But it's important to know the market and survey the market.
I think the promise of RTB to a certain extent was to bring in some of this standardization and say, you don't have to go and do $1,000, $10,000 media buys with all these different sites if you want to reach, very specific content. And we've seen that there are some standards, and obviously you can have one platform and go out and buy multiple sources of inventory. But I think you're right. It could be going back the other way. Will we see a point where you can't use the DoubleClick bid manager to buy AppNexus inventory? I don't know. Hopefully not. But there is a little bit of that fragmentation as I think people are entrenching themselves into their own tech stacks.
For me, I think this is the greatest time to be doing what we're doing. It's a paradigm shift. I think you have to change the way you fundamentally think about how you go to market with a solution. No longer can you pick one stack, and make a trade-off every single time. People have had to create. We've adopted the approach of creating an open ecosystem, an open marketplace where we can look at best-in-class individual pieces of technology. People have got a bigger vertical stack, and we can now just let empirical evidence start to guide the selections that we make, start to configure custom solutions. This is just a new skill set. This is a new industry, and it's awesome. I mean, this is, again, the most exciting time to be doing what we're doing because we have greater data, better tools, smarter people. Everything about what we're doing is just that much better than what we tried to do during the first wave of digital when this whole thing started 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think we all agree. It is a great time to be in our space. Given that, I'm sure there are still some significant challenges. Could you speak to kind of the biggest ones you see that we still need to overcome?
Well, I think it's the myths, and Brian actually laid 7 of them out there, and the fact that we haven't taken one of them off is probably the biggest indicator that we're still there. I mean, we're in the very early stages of a transformational movement in our space. We're in the first innings. We're the infant. Use any kludgy analogy you want. It's the beginning. So we're still trying to figure it out. That's more the message. It's not that we should stop doing certain things, that we just need to constantly evolve the how, the what, because the principles are going to remain exactly as they are. We're just going to get smarter and learn more about how we do it, and we're going to start to solve some of these tensions between buy-side technology, people, operational systems versus technology systems, all these things that are at conflict. We just need to let those conflicts work out and let performance be our guide. Let the end goal of what we're doing be our ultimate guide, which is, are we effectively being paid to sell something on behalf of a client? Are we effectively shifting a piece of consumer behavior so that they change awareness of something? As long as that's our end goal, the how and all these conflicts are going to be resolved at a certain point.
I think one thing that we could probably fix relatively quickly and encourage brand advertisers to start spending more dollars through RTB would be ad formats. So right now we're looking at standard IAB display units accounting for the majority of RTB spend, and I would estimate 98+% of actual impressions served. Sure, we've got video coming online. I was really hopeful to see the IAB Rising Stars come out and standardize some much better looking units that brand advertisers are going to want, and that frankly I'll pay a publisher a lot more money to buy in an RTB environment. I know people are working to bring some of these online, but the scale still is not there. We're seeing in the past year more 300 by 600 ad units coming online, which is okay, great, we have a slightly bigger ad, but it's still not a really good brand experience. Roadblocks or site skin, whole takeovers are not something that we can really go and buy at scale programmatically. And you look at native advertising and what's happening there, obviously that's going to be a real challenge for us to go and buy native advertising. I think that's going to have to be done hand to hand, but we should be able to go out and buy high quality, rich media, standardized ad units across thousands of websites, and I think we should be able to do it this year.
Yeah, I mean, everything needs to be improved and should always be improved all the time. I think the industry needs to work together in order to get things approved. These intermittent things that are causing us to just delay the execution of great work. So things like, viewability for me is a great example. Everyone knows that it's important. Everyone knows that it works. We can't quite agree on a standard, both in terms of technology and then also, education and the percent at which is acceptable. Yet we can do that. We could all agree something like that. It's completely within our reach, and actually it would be more effective for the industry if we did. And I think these are the kind of things that, there needs to be much more of a collective kind of push forward and getting momentum behind these fundamentals, and so we can all deliver better experiences to all of our different brands.
So Joe had asked Brian a question at the end about what's driving the drop in growth from the prior prediction, and I wondered if you guys had any thoughts on that yourselves in regard to what you're seeing in your business, and to the point of perhaps viewability. Is it a access to inventory? Has it become more efficient? So it's not about the dollars being spent total, it's about the quality of the inventory.
Well, I could say that our numbers have not dipped. We've actually had a fairly big increase in the last year. I think that what's driving our growth, so North America, the trend line is still growing, but it's not growing as fast as it's growing outside of North America. Outside of North America, we're just seeing an incredible appetite to, like what happened with search and every other digital trend hitting outside of the US. It gets adopted really quickly. The growth curve is steeper. So it's actually happening faster outside of North America. I think the aggregate is, there's probably an efficiency game that's being played outside of the US as well. But for us, it's actually still a growing market.
I think there are several factors at play. I think one is there is a bit of a flight to quality, and there are some things that are just not coming into that programmatic space that maybe we thought they would. The premium stuff, the publishers are moving really a lot slower. You know, I think Dow Jones now has some of their inventory accessible through a private marketplace, but they're very careful about how they'll sell that and who they sell it to. They really want net new advertisers, not people that they're already doing direct business with. So I think that has been slower. Then you have more excitement around native advertising and dollars going there. And on a CPM basis, those things tend to be much more expensive. So we're still running a lot of impressions through RTB. But if anything, with the addition of FBX, some of that pricing is going down because you can get a lot of inventory on Facebook for less than a $1 CPM. So I think that might be bringing some things down a little bit with the sort of first party, retargeting and blasting out, dropping a lot of cookies. People now have another channel to do that. And then when they really want a high quality experience, they're still needing to go direct for at least a certain portion of that spend.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there's growth, and there's definitely, you can see in the industry, there's obviously a problem with kind of optimizing yourself towards oblivion, because you identify a metric that might be good today but may not be right for you tomorrow. And so that obviously means that you optimize yourself towards nothing, and as impressions get cheaper and cheaper, you really start to get into, I guess, probably a pretty difficult world. I think what's nice about the people are becoming smarter with data. There's better ad units like video coming on board. It means that people can actually effectively pay more for impressions and be smarter about the targeting. Also, I like to think that people are managing customers better. So rather than just looking to sell to someone today and that be the end of it, they're using a much more kind of CRM approach with what they're doing in display, so that they're delivering different messages to consumers rather than just kind of choosing to not buy them, or to just to kind of optimize themselves towards only a CPA and that one static metric.
So you mentioned viewability a couple times, Alan, and obviously that's an important thing to ComScore. I wonder, there's been a number of suggestions that it's all just math. So I'd love to get your perspective on why viewability matters. I certainly have my own, but when 50% of the ads aren't seen, but you're factoring that in with the CPM and the way you're paying, and if it's about an ROI, then why does it really matter?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess when I saw the results, it made sense. Viewability was a direct correlation to performance, and that to
Shocking.
me, yeah, exactly, right.
The
and
more people that see ads, the more effective this is going to be.
That's
this
exactly
is freaking awesome. We have cracked it as an industry, man. Let's do it.
And I think, well, that's an interesting point, right? Because there's this whole problem of people potentially not measuring things in the right way, and and that then leading to basically cookie stuffing and ultimately recording sales that were perhaps not real. But for me, a lot of what we're doing is measured all, on a CPA basis, but also on kind of attitudinal study basis, and so the exposure is so important in order for us to ultimately maximize that kind of shift in attitude. And so for us, it's a fundamental in making sure people see ads so that we can ultimately perform. But you're right, you highlight an interesting point, which is the value of that. So when you rationalize it all, and when you come out to, well, effectively I paid this, but the viewability was X%, and now I've got viewable ads that are at this CPM, and that compares to to another publisher. Yes, that is important. So viewability standards within different types of media are what's important. Like an ad network has a considerably different viewability percentage to some a premium publisher, and understanding that and understanding the value is something that we actually bring into our planning process so that we can be more effective in the way that we plan and execute, and that is definitely a consideration for this.
Let me just say, when we talk about buying only viewable impressions, I've heard the argument that it's going to be better for the buyer and we're going to have greater efficiencies because we're only buying viewable impressions. I've heard the argument that it's going to be better for the publisher because they're going to be able to charge more for their viewable impressions. those both can't be right. And then on the other hand, you have ComScore, who is trying to make a business out of this. And to Brian's point of advertisers aren't spending more and more and more, it's relatively fixed. So I don't see that it's going to be a huge win really for any of us. Probably ComScore, you guys have the best chance to take a share out there, but I do see it as more of a math game. And okay, we only pay for the ads that are seen, but half of them weren't seen, so we pay twice as much, plus a little bit for ComScore to keep us all in line. And yeah, we have better metrics at the end of the day. We're not taking credit for a sale for somebody that didn't see an ad at all, but I think we're going to have to go one step beyond just measuring the viewability into, did people actually register the ad? Did they look at it from an eye tracking standpoint? And did they take an action as a result of seeing it that we can prove out statistically?
So for me, I think that there's just a couple of things. Number one, forget about the math. This is not about the math. This is about just bringing quality to the fore. It's a conversation around do what you say you're going to do. It's just like third-party ad serving and how we used to have to agree on what a publisher said was served versus what a buyer said was served. It's exactly the same thing as ad verification and when you had to audit through Double Verify and all these other companies to say that you bought the people that you thought you were going to buy and you sold the people that you thought. It's just a call to quality. Do what you say you're going to do. Serve to who you say it's going to serve. Don't create more ads below the fold that are running in comparison. It's just a call to that. So let the mechanics just be that at its top end.
Great. So I think we're at our time, but we have a couple of minutes for questions.
If you have any questions.
Oh, Norm Page, shocking.
Norm Page, celebrating my first day of work at the Rubicon Project. I've been practicing that all morning. I wanted to bring the conversation.
I'm glad you didn't say your first day of work, because then we'd be worried.
I wanted to bring the conversation back to first-party data, and I'm curious what the more sophisticated brands are doing about data activation of first-party data. I think we all get that they're overlaying it on media and buying it. I think everybody in the room, speaking for everybody here, we get that. What are you seeing as trends in terms of what the really sophisticated brands are thinking about, anywhere from, hey, can we do a private data exchange within the holding company, to, I get this stuff better than you do, and I'm going to go build my own stack?
Well, maybe I don't think it's about the building your own stack, Norm. I think creating private exchanges. This is probably going to be the thing that drives premium media companies into private exchanges, because if you can guarantee that it's a controlled environment where you are responsible for your own data and a client is willing to partner with you, and you know that is the only place and only way data is going to get transacted on, then I'm willing to bring more of my inventory in. I'm willing to bring more of my content in. As a client, I'm willing to bring my my subscriber lists. I'm willing to bring my customer data in so that we can match those and do really smart cross-selling campaigns, starting to focus on loyalty being an angle and not just prospect-based advertising. I think, Norm, we're absolutely seeing that trend, that sophisticated clients that have used their data well, auto manufacturers, CPGs, who they use audience intelligence really well. They're just bringing that now into our stack so that you can transact on it on a media sense with a little bit more speed than they could before. I mean, I think that's the biggest change that we've seen.
And that's been happening in the offline world for some time now. There are these data exchanges where people can get more insight into, let's look at our top 10 or 20% best customers and what do they look like and where can we get more information to append to our own database. Now that's actionable because we can bring that online and we can say, let's find out exactly who those people are, bring in data points from 200 other retailers or advertisers, and then serve ads to those that fit that characteristic of our client's best customer but are not current customers. So I think we're seeing the offline-online gap starting to be bridged a little bit.
Yeah, and so there's definitely an overlay of offline metrics. I guess the thing that always kind of, the thing that I always struggle with in data is understanding the value of data. There's a lot of data providers out there, and they're selling a lot of data that's actually, the quality of it is very disparate. And actually, it means if you're really trying to test data and develop a program around data, then if the quality is so varying, then you can't really build and you know, really progress on that. And I think that's something that is a real struggle for a lot of agencies.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we're on time, so thank you for doing that. I had a few questions, but it could be a whole nother panel discussion. You guys were great. Boy. So for our next presentation, I'd like to invite Karsten Vida, who is the, oops, let me turn that off. Sorry about that. Who's with IDC, and he's head of a program for digital media and entertainment, and IDC is one of the leaders tracking the econometrics, the marketplace surrounding digital media and advertising and entertainment. And he's going to kind of frame the marketplace, kind of jumping off of where Brian started this morning, and kind of give us a view for where we are now and where we might be going. So Karsten, thank you.
So let's get rid of my phones. Awesome. Good morning, everybody. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the major trends that we see in the display and the real-time bidding segment. We're going to tell you a little bit about the numbers that we see today and that we see going forward, so the forecasted numbers. Does this work? There you go. The numbers that I'm going to talk to you about are from our new media market model. It's a big model with a lot of data points covering the consumer internet market space. Those numbers that you're going to see, just to have some housekeeping and some sourcing, are going to be from that model. So, as I said, I'm going to talk to you about the major trends and the numbers in the marketplace. And in order for you to understand those numbers and those trends, it's first of all important to understand the landscape, where we're coming from. So when I started in this industry, I can't believe it was 17 years ago at Yahoo, we started to sell ads on the internet. And our major sales argument was, you know what, it's all machine-based. We have all these log files, we get loads of data. It's going to be much, much more accountable than advertising on TV or on the radio, let alone print. Now, when I started covering RTB 2 years ago as an industry analyst, I was surprised to see that in the past 15 years, none of that had become reality, except for search advertising, direct response. There you had some accountability based on data, but in the display space, really almost none of that had become reality. So what that means is today, when you look at the display space, the vast majority of that is still being sold as if you were running a newspaper. 85% of the spending in the display ad space in the United States, is still being sold as if you're running a newspaper over 100 years ago. It goes across the entire value chain. Sales is still manual. You know, it's a guy sitting there, picking up the phone, calling Joe or Pete or Jack and saying, hey, Jack, awesome, those beers yesterday. You know, one of them 10 must have been bad because I have a huge headache. Oh yeah, your daughter is sick? I'm really sorry to hear that. Hope she gets better. Oh, by the way, do you want to buy my stuff? That's really how sales still works in the display space today. Media planning, the decision where the money's actually physically going to go. There's a junior guy sitting in an ad agency with a huge spreadsheet and says, 2 million go to Yahoo, 1 million goes to AOL, 10 million go to Google, 2 million go to Facebook. The tracking and the optimization of the campaign, still manual. He collects all those data after a week, sits down, plugs the data in the spreadsheet, figures out, well, how did AOL work versus Yahoo versus Google, et cetera, optimizes the campaign. Of course, that's 85% of the spending in the display space that's ripe for, becoming much more efficient. There's unrealized efficiencies in the vast majority of the display space. And so, fortunately, or for some unfortunately, there's, of course, programmatic trading. Now, programmatic trading is nothing really new, even though I should say that some people use the term interchangeably or synonymous with RTB. We don't do that. What we really mean by that is anything that's being traded on a software basis. And ad exchanges have been around for a long time. The Right Media Exchange must be going on 10 years now. So it's been around since 2003, so programmatic trading has been around for a long time. But programmatic trading and exchanges have really been developed originally just to optimize the trading that used to happen on ad exchanges, also manually. And that's because the quality of the inventory, the commercial value of that inventory, was so low that it didn't deserve human attention in the first place. Now, real-time bidding is taking that to a whole new level. What you have on an ad exchange, inventory gets traded in chunks. It's 1,000 impressions or multiples thereof. It's 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 impressions being sold on an ad exchange. In RTB, that's different. In RTB, impressions get sold as they become available in real time. Let's say my wife goes to superbeauty.com and she clicks on the link and the page comes up. And the web browser sends a call to the content server creates the page. The content server says to the ad server, hey, ad server, I got a couple of impressions here, I need ads for those. And the ad exchange, the ad server says to the ad exchange, put that out for bidding. And the ad exchange, if it's RTB based, will put out this one impression for bidding. And it'll say, it's on superbeauty.com, so it's about cosmetics perhaps, and it's a female, and she's 36 years of age, and she's got a couple of kids. She's a graduate degree, X thousand dollars in annual household income, so she's working in the environmental space, so maybe she's interested in high-end cosmetics, organic, high-end cosmetics. Who wants to bid on that one impression? And income bids from, maybe like 50 bidders actually. So 50 bidders will bid for this one single impression. The highest bidder will get it. The ads get served back to the content server. The content server inserts the ad into the page and serves it to my wife. Gone in 30 milliseconds. It's going to happen in 30 milliseconds, ideally. So for the user, it's completely transparent. Nothing has changed from the old ways where it might have been a static ad, actually. Sometimes it's a little bit slower. In practice, maybe it's 50 milliseconds, or it can be up to 100 milliseconds, mostly because you have to wait for the bidders, and they're not always very fast. If it's more than 100 milliseconds, that's really the cutoff, because if it's a tenth of a second, that becomes noticeable to the user. So ideally, you don't want to have that. But that's how this works. Now, when you talk to the ad exchanges, they love it. We've talked to ad agencies. When you talk to ad agencies, they love it. They love RTB. They can't get enough of it. As a matter of fact, for our research, we frequently talk to them once a year, a round of interviews with ad agencies here in the States, in Europe, in Japan, and they tell us, we love it. You know what? We have to pay more for the inventory than before. And the more is anywhere between 50% or 100% sometimes even. And we don't really care. We don't really care because the lift in ad effectiveness is much higher than what we have to pay more. So we don't really care how expensive it is because it works a whole lot better than that. As a matter of fact, some of them will tell me, depending on the industry, there's not enough inventory to go around. If you're talking automotive or financial or telcos, sometimes there's not enough inventory to go around. They can't get enough of that stuff. They want so much of the stuff that they're buying it in droves. They're buying a lot of the stuff, and that's because there's a lot of growth in this space. When you talk to people in the industry, hey, what's hot? People will say Video is hot. A lot of video goes to over the top, goes internet-based. You know, consumers are voting with their feet. So therefore, there's a lot of growth there in advertising. If you look at the compound annual growth rate over the next 4 years that we forecast, in other words, the average annual growth rate to get where this is supposed to go, it's a 27% growth rate. It's pretty good, won't you think? I mean, the economy grows at, let's say, 2%, 3%, 4%, 27%, pretty good. The other hot segment, of course, is mobile. As a matter of fact, most people in the industry will say, this is the fastest growing segment in the industry. It's a 36% growth rate annually. But if you look at RTB, the numbers that we have forecast until 2016, you have a growth rate of more than 50% annually on average. That's how much growth there is. This chart shows you the spending that we forecast for the major regions in the world. There are a number of interesting things here to say. First of all, the United States, 2012, about $2 billion in spending based on RTB platforms. That puts the 50% CAGR, the 50% annual average growth rate in perspective, because, you know, anyone can have 50% growth rate. Anyone can have a 100% growth rate. If the market's small enough and it's emergent enough, heck, I can have 150% CAGR. Doesn't really matter. But this is a market that's already $2 billion, and still you have more than 50% growth rate. So this is something that's growing very, very rapidly. There's a lot of real dollars there, a lot of real money there in this particular segment. So that's number one. Number two is the United States will be, for the foreseeable future, be the most important segment, the most important region out there. That's not really that surprising. It's always the case for the United States. There's a couple of reasons why. One, it's because, you know, the United States are just more technologically advanced in online, so it's not that surprising. It's also a very homogeneous market. So you have 360 million people all in one market, one language. That makes the marketplace much more dynamic. That's not the case in Europe, which is the second biggest region here. If you look at the European markets, well, they're typically 18 months behind, 2 years behind. That's the case here too. And the markets are much more limited. Germany, 80 million people. France, 60 million people. The United Kingdom, I'm making numbers up, 55 million. It's very small markets comparatively. So that makes the market much less dynamic. So there's less spending there. They're probably 18 to 24 months behind in terms of RTB deployment.